"Remove her before she makes a scene," my sister commanded, her voice slicing right through the elegant string music playing in the background. The heavy scent of white lilies hit the back of my throat. It smelled thick and sweet, exactly like a funeral. Under my thin heels, the polished marble floor of the Wrenwood Hall foyer felt like a block of ice. I gripped the small velvet box in my hand, the wedding gift I had spent 3 weeks tracking down, and watched the bride point a manicured finger directly at my chest. I was 38 years old. I stood there in a quiet, dark blue dress, completely alone, while my 33-year-old sister stood 10 feet away, wrapped in thousands of dollars of white silk, treating me like a dangerous trespasser. A man in a dark suit stepped into my path. He held a digital tablet tight against his chest. "Ma'am, I need you to step back toward the doors," the security guard said. His tone was perfectly polite, and that somehow made it worse. "We have a security note under the name Vanessa Price. You are not on the cleared guest list." Guests gathered near the coat check stopped moving. Conversations died, and heads turned. The back of my neck burned as dozens of strangers watched the drama unfold. "Vanessa, please." Mom stepped out from behind the bride's massive train. Patricia Price wore a silver gown that caught the light from the glass dome above us. She reached out and grabbed my bare arm. Her fingers were freezing. "Today is your sister's day," my mother whispered, her nails digging slightly into my skin. "Do not make this about yourself. Just go." I looked down at her hand, but I did not pull away. For my entire life, I had been the one expected to step aside. I was the quiet worker, the single older sister, the one who paid the bills while Brittany got the applause. And now I was being asked to disappear from a family wedding simply because my presence threatened the perfect image they wanted to project. "Did you tell them I was dangerous?" I asked, keeping my voice absolutely level. Brittany took a step forward. A smug, victorious smile spread across her perfect makeup. "I told them the truth." She turned to the guard, raising her chin. "Security, remove her." The foyer went completely still. Even the string quartet in the next room seemed to pause. The guard shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, but he began to reach out to guide me toward the exit. He was just doing his job. He was following the protocol written in the venue operations manual. I knew that manual by heart. I did not argue with him. I did not yell at my mother or curse at the bride. Instead, I looked past the wall of white flowers and locked eyes with the woman sitting at the coordinator's desk. Claire Whitman sat perfectly straight. She gave me a single microscopic nod. Her hands were already moving across her keyboard, quietly logging the incident into the system, following the exact emergency protocol we had discussed. I opened my clutch and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number and held it to my ear. "Who are you calling?" Brittany asked, her voice tight with sudden irritation. "Put the phone away and leave." "Evelyn," I said into the receiver. "I am at the front check-in. Please come out here right now." I ended the call and dropped the phone back into my bag. Mom sighed loudly, crossing her arms. "Are you calling a cab?" "We could have arranged a car for you if you had just asked politely." I let the silence hang in the air. The chill from the Connecticut autumn wind slipped through the automatic doors behind me, swirling around our ankles. Nobody moved. The guests waited, holding their breath, expecting me to break down in tears. Rapid footsteps echoed sharply against the marble. Evelyn Ross marched out from the private executive corridor. The general manager of Wrenwood Hall wore a sharp black suit and carried a thick, cream-colored folder. Her face was tight with suppressed fury. She walked straight past the security guard, completely ignoring my mother, and stepped directly in front of the bride. "Is there a problem here?" Evelyn asked, her voice carrying the cold authority of a woman who managed a multi-million-dollar estate. "Yes, there is a problem," Brittany snapped. "I asked your staff to remove this woman 10 minutes ago. She is threatening the peace of my wedding." Evelyn did not blink. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes fixed firmly on the golden child of my family. "Ma'am," Evelyn said, loud enough for every guest in the foyer to hear, "she owns this venue." The room fell dead silent. A glass clinked somewhere in the background. The guard lowered his tablet slowly, his eyes widening in shock. All the color drained from Brittany's face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at me, then at Evelyn, shaking her head. That is impossible, my sister finally stammered, her voice cracking. She cannot own anything like this. This is Marigold House Holdings. And Vanessa Price is the managing member and sole owner of Marigold House Holdings, Evelyn replied smoothly. What is going on out here? A deep voice broke through the tension. I turned to see a tall man walking into the foyer, adjusting the cuffs of his tuxedo. Daniel Reed, the groom. He looked at the security guard, then at his pale bride, and finally settled his confused gaze on me. Brittany, Daniel said, his brow furrowing. Why is your sister being stopped at the check-in? Brittany opened her mouth to speak, but panic had stolen her perfectly rehearsed lines. Evelyn stepped forward, sliding the cream folder under her arm, and took absolute control of the space. Mr. Reed, Evelyn said clearly. Because you are listed as a co-client on the event contract, we need to continue this conversation regarding the security request in the executive office. We will go there now. 3 months before the silence fell over that marble foyer, my office felt like a sanctuary. Late June sunlight pressed against the window panes of the executive suite, but the air inside stayed perfectly cool. The scent of fresh roasted coffee and expensive leather usually kept my mind clear. That morning, my focus broke the second a soft knock sounded at the door. Claire Whitman stepped into the room. Our lead coordinator held a silver tablet tight against her navy blazer. She did not take her usual seat across the mahogany desk. Instead, she stood near the door, shifting her weight from side to side. We had worked together for 2 years, and Claire rarely looked nervous. We have a new contract for the first week of autumn, Claire said, her voice unusually tight. The base deposit cleared this morning. But there is a client note you need to see. She placed the tablet gently on my desk and slid it forward. The bride is named Brittany Price, the coordinator added, watching my face carefully. During the intake call, she mentioned a sister. An older sister who might, in her words, create an uncomfortable scene. She gave us a name to watch out for. My hand paused over my coffee mug. The ceramic felt suddenly cold against my fingers. I looked down at the glowing screen and read the email Brittany had sent the booking team. The words sat right there in black and white, perfectly typed in my sister's signature cheerful font. She wrote that her sister had always struggled when attention was not focused on her. She claimed she wanted everyone to feel safe and happy, so she thought it was best to warn the event staff in advance. A familiar pressure built up behind my ribs. It was the exact same heavy ache I carried when I worked double shifts at a diner to pay for my sister's prom dress, only to hear my mother tell the neighbors that Brittany was simply born to wear beautiful things. The memory of my mother's perfume, a sharp floral scent, drifted into my mind alongside her voice. She always told me to let my sister have her moment. She always said I was so strong, and that being strong meant I should not make things difficult for the family. Being strong meant being invisible. Being difficult simply meant asking to be included. I pushed the tablet back toward the edge of the desk. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass of the screen, calm and motionless. Is this a coincidence? Claire asked, her tone dropping to a whisper. Or do we need to decline this booking? It is not a coincidence. I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands over my lap. She is my sister. Confusion flashed across the coordinator's face. She looked around the spacious office, taking in the framed blueprints and the operating license. She asked why my sister would try to book a wedding here without talking to me, and why she would write something so damaging in an official document. Because my family does not know I own Wrenwood Hall, I said quietly. The truth was simple, yet it always sounded absurd when spoken aloud. A few years ago, the previous owner faced bankruptcy. I had spent a decade building a career in corporate event management, quietly saving every dollar, and living in a modest apartment while my family assumed I was just a struggling, single-career woman. When the opportunity arose, I purchased the estate through a holding company. Marigold House Holdings appeared on every contract, every vendor invoice, and every tax document. My family never asked about my work, so I never offered the details. They needed me to be the plain, quiet sister who never quite succeeded, and I had simply stopped trying to correct them. We can refund the deposit right now, Claire offered. Her professional distance vanished, replaced by a fierce loyalty. I can draft an email citing a scheduling conflict. You do not have to host someone who speaks about you this way. The urge to cancel was a physical weight in my chest. One email, and Brittany would lose her dream venue. But if I did that, I would become exactly the person she described in her intake form. I would be the bitter older sister ruining her special day. No, I told the coordinator, keeping my voice perfectly steady. Accept the booking. Let the contract stand. Claire frowned, her hand hovering over the tablet. She warned me that if the bride was already setting this kind of narrative, things would only escalate. If my sister wants a beautiful wedding, she will have one, I explained, looking out the window at the manicured front lawn. But if she chooses to use this venue to humiliate me, she will do it entirely on her own. We will not set any traps. We will not ask her probing questions. I turned back to the woman standing across the desk. I instructed her to just follow standard procedure. She needed to document every communication, and if the bride made any security requests, we would require them in writing. We would treat her exactly like any other client. Claire nodded slowly, the professional mask sliding back into place. She picked up the device and turned toward the door. The plan was clean, simple, and completely dependent on Brittany making her own choices. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing catering margins, forcing myself to treat the day like any normal Tuesday. The strategy held up perfectly until the sun began to set. My desk phone chimed with a priority internal message. I clicked the blinking light, and the speaker crackled to life. "Vanessa," Claire said, her tone completely flat. The bride just called back. She asked whether we can legally deny you entry before you even reach the ballroom. 2 weeks passed before the groom made his first mistake. Rain lashed against the windows of the executive office, blurring the manicured lawns of Wrenwood Hall into a wash of green and gray. I sat at my mahogany desk, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The internal communication system chimed gently. A single notification flashed on my monitor. Claire wanted me to look at the client portal. I walked down the quiet corridor to the coordinator station. The venue felt empty and vast on a Tuesday morning. Claire sat behind her curved desk, her fingers resting lightly on the keyboard. She did not look up when I approached. "Daniel Reed just called," Claire said, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "He wanted to check on a missing RSVP. My stomach gave a sharp, uncomfortable twist. I asked her who he was looking for. "You," the coordinator replied, finally meeting my eyes. The groom wanted to know why the sister of the bride had not responded to the wedding invitation. He told me that family should be there, and he sounded genuinely confused. A strange warmth bloomed in my chest. For 38 years, I had assumed every person drawn into my sister's orbit eventually adopted her version of reality. I thought Daniel was just another willing participant in my exclusion. But the man was asking questions. Claire clicked her mouse twice. The screen switched to the digital guest list version history. She pointed to a line of text recorded 2 weeks earlier. The log clearly showed Daniel Reed adding Vanessa Price to the master list. Then, exactly 3 hours later, a second entry appeared. Brittany Price had logged in and deleted my name. "He does not know," I murmured, staring at the timestamps. "She is doing this entirely behind his back." My future brother-in-law was not the architect of my humiliation. He was merely another piece on my sister's board, being moved into place without his knowledge. Daniel actually believed I was simply ignoring their wedding. Brittany had likely told him I was bitter about being single, painting herself as the patient bride dealing with a difficult relative. My cell phone began to vibrate in my pocket. The caller ID displayed my mother's name. Patricia Price had impeccable timing. I stepped away from the desk, walked into a vacant meeting room, and pressed the phone to my ear. "Hello, Mom." "Vanessa, darling," Patricia said. Her tone was light and breathy, the exact voice she used at country club luncheons when she wanted to sound effortlessly wealthy. "I am just calling to check on you. Wedding planning has been so incredibly stressful for your sister." I leaned against the glass wall. The cold surface seeped through the sleeve of my blouse, chilling my skin. I waited for her to actually say something real. But she did not. "Brittany is under a lot of pressure," my mother continued, filling the silence. "You know how she gets. She just needs everything to be peaceful right now. We all have to respect her space and let her have this moment. The subtext hung heavy in the air. Patricia was trying to uninvite me without leaving fingerprints on the crime scene. "Am I invited to the wedding?" I asked. My voice held no anger, only a flat demand for the truth. A sharp sigh hissed through the phone speaker. "Vanessa, please do not turn this into an interrogation. Every family has their private struggles. Do not make things difficult. I just want a yes or a no," I told the woman who had raised me. "I have to go," Patricia snapped, her country club facade dropping instantly. "The florist is calling me on the other line." The line went dead. I stared at the dark screen, my jaw aching from how hard I was clenching my teeth. My mother knew exactly what Brittany was doing, and she was choosing the path of least resistance. She would rather force me to disappear than force her golden child to behave. I returned to the executive suite and threw myself into reviewing vendor invoices. The work usually grounded me, but the numbers blurred together. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that deleted entry on the guest list. Late in the afternoon, the heavy wooden door to my office opened again. Claire stepped inside, carrying her silver tablet. "The bride called back," the coordinator announced, her expression grim. She must have found out Daniel spoke to me. She was very distressed on the phone, acting completely terrified. I motioned for Claire to continue, my pulse picking up a steady, heavy beat. Brittany had put on a spectacular performance. According to the venue notes, my sister claimed Daniel simply did not understand our complicated family dynamics. She told Claire that I was unpredictable, and the venue needed to protect the bride at all costs. "I followed the procedure," Claire explained, setting the tablet on my desk. I informed her that verbal concerns are not enough to alter our security protocols. I told her that if she wanted to deny someone entry, she had to submit an official security instruction form. We did not have to wait long to see how far my sister would go. A notification chime echoed through the quiet office. An email had just arrived in the management inbox. Claire reached out and tapped the screen, opening the digital file sent directly from Brittany's account. It was the security request form, fully completed and digitally signed. I leaned forward and read the words typed in the justification box. Brittany had written that I had a history of emotional instability and potential disruption. My own sister had formally documented a lie, creating a paper trail that branded me a threat to public safety. Claire forwarded a copy of the file to Evelyn Ross for the master event record. The trap was no longer a theoretical concept. My sister had just walked right in and handed us the lock. I looked at the glowing signature on the screen, a perfect digital copy of Brittany's handwriting. "Well," I said quietly, the cold thing inside my chest settling into absolute calm. "Now she has made it official." The heavy mahogany door of the executive suite clicked shut, sealing us in absolute silence. Evelyn Ross spread the 30-page event contract across the polished wood of my desk. The general manager moved with practiced precision, her manicured fingers smoothing down the thick, cream-colored paper. Over by the window, Claire sat on the leather sofa, holding her silver tablet tightly against her chest like a protective shield. "We have multiple grounds for termination," Evelyn stated, tracing a line of text with her silver pen. Section 4 covers client misconduct and false security concerns. Section 9 addresses harassment of staff or ownership representatives. Both clauses grant us the immediate right to pause or terminate event services without refund. I looked down at the black ink. The legal language felt cold, clinical, and completely detached from the lifetime of quiet insults I had endured. It reduced 38 years of family favoritism into a simple breach of contract. "If we execute a pause," Evelyn continued, her voice dropping into a firm, risk management tone, "we do it strictly by the book. We prioritize privacy above everything else. If an incident occurs tomorrow, the file is reviewed only in this office, behind closed doors, with authorized parties. We do not read client records in the middle of a crowded foyer, and we do not air dirty laundry in public." "Agreed." I leaned forward and rested my elbows on the desk. "No one sets a trap for my sister. We do not bait her, and we do not ask leading questions. If Brittany chooses to breach this agreement, she does it entirely on her own. Every single piece of evidence has to come from her voluntary actions. A soft sigh came from the sofa. Claire pulled up a new document on her screen, walked over, and set the tablet on the desk right next to the printed contract. "There is one more thing," the coordinator said softly, refusing to meet my eyes. "The bride sent this email right after she submitted the official security request." I picked up the device. The bright glare of the screen stung my eyes. It was a formal billing inquiry from my sister. Brittany had asked the venue management to waive the extra security fees, citing a difficult family situation. She wrote that her sister created scenes when attention shifted away from her, so the venue should provide the extra guards as a complimentary courtesy to protect the bridal party. My throat tightened instantly. A sour, metallic taste coated the back of my tongue. For years, my sister had used my quiet nature to make herself look like the perfect, suffering victim. Now, she was literally weaponizing her fabricated pain to get a discount on a luxury wedding package. She had turned my targeted exclusion into a coupon. The sheer audacity of the request made the air in the room feel incredibly thin. I set the tablet face down on the wood. "Treat her perfectly," I instructed the two women standing before me. "Maintain absolute professional courtesy from the moment she arrives until the moment she leaves. Nobody gossips with the vendors, and nobody mentions the ownership structure." Evelyn gathered the contract papers, nodding once. She promised that the staff would be flawless. When the general manager and the coordinator left the office, the silence rushed back in, heavy and suffocating. I opened my personal laptop. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time, listening to the steady hum of the air conditioning vent above me. A desperate, foolish part of me wanted to give my family one final chance to do the right thing. I typed a single direct question to my mother. Should I attend my sister's wedding? I hit send, closed the laptop lid, and waited. The answer arrived 3 hours later. Patricia Price did not say yes, and she did not say no. She simply replied with one brief sentence: "Please do not embarrass us." My mother had essentially handed me a gag order. She wanted me to either stay away entirely or show up and remain completely invisible, standing in the shadows so I would not ruin the aesthetic of her perfect family. I read the words 5 times, letting the cold reality of her choice wash over me. She knew exactly what was happening, and she chose to protect the lie. The evening before the wedding, heavy autumn rain began to fall over the Connecticut hills. I sat alone in my dark living room, watching the water run down the glass panes. My cell phone buzzed loudly against the wooden coffee table, breaking the quiet. A message from Claire glowed on the screen, forwarded straight from the venue management system. The bride had sent one final definitive instruction to the front desk. If Vanessa Price steps onto the property, remove her before she reaches the photos. Brittany had just sealed her own fate. She had actively ordered the physical removal of the estate owner from her own property, putting it in writing without a single second of hesitation. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the digital keyboard. I did not feel angry anymore. I did not feel sad or betrayed. I just felt a deep, hollow calm, like a storm that had finally run out of rain. Then tomorrow, I typed back to my team, "We follow procedure." The last Saturday of September brought a sharp chill to Fairfield County, and outside my apartment window, the maple leaves had just started turning a deep, bruised red. I stood in front of my mirror, tracing the collar of a dark blue dress. It was an expensive cut, but intentionally understated. I had chosen it specifically to blend into the shadows of a ballroom. I picked up a silver-framed photograph from my dresser and wiped a speck of dust from the glass. The picture showed 2 little girls in mismatched Halloween costumes, holding hands on a front porch. I looked at my younger sister's smiling face for a long moment, and then I placed the frame face down on the wood. I was not going to the venue to beg for an invitation today, and I was certainly not going to beg for her love anymore. My cell phone vibrated on the mattress. A new notification flashed across the screen, signaling an update in the Wrenwood Hall management portal. Claire was executing the final step of our protocol. The coordinator had walked into the bridal suite to give my sister one last chance to walk away from the disaster she was creating. The official event file captured the exact sequence of events, and the uncomfortable whispers from the catering staff filled in the rest of the details later that afternoon. The bridal suite smelled like expensive hairspray and chilled champagne. My sister sat in the center makeup chair, surrounded by bridesmaids in matching silk robes. When someone mentioned the seating chart, Brittany laughed. She told the room that the only thing missing from the perfect aesthetic was my funeral-level energy. The bridesmaids managed a few awkward chuckles, but the tension in the room immediately thickened. My mother arrived a moment later. Patricia walked up behind the makeup chair and gently adjusted the edge of the white veil. She announced to the room that nobody was allowed to bring down the mood today, effectively giving her golden child a free pass to say or do whatever she wanted. That was when Claire stepped forward with her silver tablet. The coordinator asked the bride to verify the final head count and review the active security notes. She asked, very clearly and professionally, if the bride wanted to update or withdraw the gate instructions regarding Vanessa Price. Brittany did not hesitate. The internal log recorded her exact words. She stated that if I showed up, she wanted me gone before the guests started asking questions. My mother stood right there, listening to her youngest daughter order the removal of her oldest. Patricia did not object, and she did not defend me. She simply looked at the coordinator and requested that the staff handle the matter discreetly. Claire typed the confirmation into the system, closed out the file, and did not argue. I read the finalized entry on my phone screen from my bedroom, watching the digital timestamp lock into place. The window of opportunity was officially closed. My family had made their choice, and now they would have to live with the consequences. I slipped into the dark blue dress, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. The drive across town felt incredibly fast. The autumn air rushing through the car vents kept my hands cold on the steering wheel, but my heartbeat remained completely steady. I turned onto the private gravel road leading to Wrenwood Hall, and the estate looked breathtaking against the gray sky. White floral arrangements lined the stone steps leading up to the entrance. The string quartet had already begun warming up somewhere inside the massive indoor ballroom, sending faint notes of classical music out into the chilly air. I parked in the far lot and walked toward the main entrance. The glass-domed foyer was bright, spotlessly clean, and completely prepped for the afternoon arrivals. A small, discreet security camera blinked red near the high ceiling, recording a wide-angle view of the check-in desk. A few early guests were already mingling near the coat check. I smoothed down the front of my skirt, took a deep breath, and stepped through the double-glass doors. A security guard in a dark suit stood right next to the floral archway. He held a digital tablet, his eyes constantly scanning the arriving crowd. As soon as I stepped onto the polished marble floor, his gaze locked onto my face. He tapped the screen twice, his expression shifting into professional alertness. He stepped directly into my path, physically blocking the way to the ballroom. "Excuse me," the guard said, keeping his voice low but firm. "Are you Vanessa Price? Are you Vanessa Price?" The single question hung in the chilly Connecticut air. I looked at the security officer blocking my path. He wore a crisp, dark suit and a discreet earpiece, holding his digital tablet with both hands. The glowing screen illuminated his tight, uncomfortable expression. "Yes," I answered quietly. "I am." "I need to ask you to step over to the check-in desk, ma'am," the officer said, gesturing toward the polished marble counter near the coat check. "There is a specific security note in the active event file regarding your name. You are not cleared to enter the main ballroom." Conversations around the foyer began to falter. The rustle of expensive silk dresses and the quiet clinking of champagne glasses faded into an awkward hush. A dozen faces turned toward the entrance. The string quartet, playing inside the grand hall, suddenly sounded very far away, their classical notes muffled by the heavy tension settling over the marble floor. Who issued that note? My voice stayed perfectly level. I did not cross my arms, and I did not raise my chin. I just stood there in my dark blue dress, letting the cold wind from the automatic doors wash over my shoulders. Before the guard could answer, hurried footsteps echoed down the private bridal corridor. Brittany emerged from the hallway, an absolute vision in thousands of dollars of white lace and tulle. She did not rush forward to greet her older sister. Instead, she stopped right at the edge of the foyer, positioning herself perfectly under the warm glow of the crystal chandelier. It was a strategic placement, ensuring every guest in the waiting area could clearly see her distress. I asked for one peaceful day, Vanessa. My sister pressed a manicured hand to her chest. Her voice trembled with practiced fragility, carrying just enough volume to reach the audience of wedding guests. Just one day where I did not have to worry about you ruining things. She looked beautiful, terrified, and completely fake. The wedding guests exchanged worried, sympathetic glances. To them, the narrative was obvious. I was the unstable, jealous relative, the dark cloud threatening to destroy a perfect autumn celebration. Did you tell them I was dangerous? I asked. The heavy scent of white lilies from the floral archway suddenly felt suffocating, settling thick and sweet in the back of my throat. A tiny, victorious smirk flickered across Brittany's flawless makeup. It vanished so quickly, no one else could have caught it. But I had spent my entire life learning to read the microscopic shifts in her expression. I told them the truth, the bride replied, her tone dripping with quiet venom. Patricia Price stepped out from the shadows of the corridor right behind her golden child. My mother wore a heavy silver gown that shimmered under the foyer lights. She hurried to her youngest daughter's side and wrapped a protective arm around the white lace, glaring at me as if I had just tracked mud across a priceless rug. "Vanessa, please," Patricia whispered, though her voice carried the sharp edge of a command. "If you have any love for this family left, you will turn around and walk out those doors. Do not make this about yourself. Do not do this to your sister." The marble floor seeped cold through the thin soles of my shoes. 38 years of stepping aside, of making myself small, of biting my tongue so my sister could shine, culminated right there on that stone floor. "I have not raised my voice," I pointed out, addressing the woman who had raised me. "I have not made a scene. I simply walked through the front door of this building." Brittany lifted her chin. The fragile victim act melted away, replaced by the vicious entitlement she usually saved for closed doors. She turned her attention back to the man in the dark suit. "Security, remove her." The harsh command echoed off the glass dome above us. Absolute silence swallowed the foyer. Nobody moved. The guard swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He was clearly torn between a paying client's direct order and the simple fact that I was standing perfectly still, doing absolutely nothing wrong. He took a hesitant step toward me, reaching out a cautious hand to guide me back into the cold afternoon. He had no idea what kind of trap he was about to trigger. I did not back away. I looked past my mother, past the smirking bride, and found Claire sitting quietly at the coordinator desk. The woman gave me a single, microscopic nod, her oring outer resting on her keyboard, officially logging the incident into the management system. Reaching into my small clutch, I pulled out my cell phone. I pressed one button on the speed dial and lifted the device to my ear. "Who are you calling?" Brittany demanded, her perfect posture stiffening. "Put that away and leave." "Evelyn," I said into the receiver, ignoring the bride completely. "I am at the front check-in. Please come out here right now." Dropping the phone back into my bag, I waited. The seconds ticked by, thick and heavy. "Are you calling a taxi?" Patricia scoffed, her silver dress rustling as she shifted her weight defensively. "Do not be ridiculous, Vanessa. You are embarrassing all of us." Sharp, rapid footsteps cut through the suffocating quiet. Evelyn Ross marched out from the private management hallway. The general manager wore a sharply tailored black suit, carrying a thick, cream-colored folder under her left arm. Her face was set in lines of pure, terrifying professionalism. The crowd of guests naturally parted for her as she crossed the foyer. Evelyn bypassed the bridal party entirely. She stopped right next to the security guard, placing a firm hand on his arm to lower his glowing tablet. "Is there a problem out here?" Evelyn asked, her voice carrying the unmistakable weight of corporate authority. "Yes, there is a massive problem," Brittany snapped, pointing a trembling finger directly at my chest. "I told your staff to remove this woman 10 minutes ago. She is not on the cleared guest list, and she is actively threatening my wedding. Get her out of here immediately." The general manager turned slowly. She looked at the golden child of my family, her expression utterly blank and completely devoid of customer service warmth. "Ma'am," Evelyn said, her voice echoing clearly across the polished stone. "She owns this venue." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of dead, heavy quiet that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Someone near the coat check dropped a champagne flute. The glass shattered against the marble, but nobody flinched. The security guard dropped his hand, his mouth falling open slightly as he stared at me. All the color instantly drained from my sister's face. The smug satisfaction vanished, replaced by a pale, hollow shock. Her manicured hand fell limply to her side. She stared at me, then at the general manager, her eyes wide with frantic, desperate confusion. "That is impossible," Brittany stammered, her voice thin and breathy. "She cannot own anything like this. The contract clearly says, Marigold House Holdings." I checked the paperwork myself. "And Vanessa Price is the managing member of Marigold House Holdings," Evelyn replied smoothly, patting the cream folder. "She is the sole authorized decision-maker for this entire estate." Heavy footsteps sounded near the front entrance, accompanied by the rustle of autumn leaves blowing inside. I turned slightly. Daniel Reed walked into the foyer, adjusting the silver cufflinks of his tailored tuxedo. The groom took one look at his pale bride, the nervous crowd of silent guests, and the venue staff surrounding me. "Brittany," Daniel said, his brow deeply furrowed as he walked toward us. "What is going on? Why is your sister being stopped at the check-in?" My sister opened her mouth, but her throat simply clicked. No words came out. The perfect, flawless narrative she had spun for months was unraveling in real time, right in front of the man she was about to marry. Before the bride could invent another lie, Evelyn stepped forward. She shifted the cream folder into her hands, smoothly and professionally, taking absolute control of the chaos. "Mr. Reed," the general manager said, addressing the groom directly, "because you are listed as a co-client on the financial agreement, we need to continue this conversation in the executive office. This involves secure client records, and we do not discuss those matters in public." The heavy oak door of the executive office clicked shut, instantly cutting off the soft classical music playing out in the foyer. The sudden quiet felt like a physical weight dropping onto our shoulders. The air inside the room smelled faintly of roasted coffee and old paper, a sharp contrast to the suffocating sweetness of the white lilies we had just left behind. Evelyn Ross bypassed the leather guest chairs and walked directly behind my massive mahogany desk. The general manager gestured for Claire and the security supervisor to stand near the back wall, ensuring we had official staff witnesses for whatever happened next. Brittany collapsed into one of the wingback chairs. Her massive white dress spilled over the dark leather, making her look like a fragile porcelain doll swallowed by the furniture. Patricia hovered right behind her, resting a protective hand on the bride's trembling shoulder. Daniel did not sit down. The groom remained standing in the center of the room, his jaw tightly set. He looked completely out of place in his tailored tuxedo, his eyes darting between the venue staff and the woman he was supposed to marry in less than an hour. "I need an explanation," Daniel demanded, his voice low but completely firm. "Someone needs to tell me exactly why my future sister-in-law was treated like a criminal at the front door." Evelyn folded her hands together and rested them on the polished wood. She did not hand over a printed copy of the file, strictly adhering to the privacy protocols we had established. "Mr. Reed," the general manager began, her tone carrying the clinical precision of a corporate attorney, "you are listed as the primary co-client on the financial agreement. Because your signature binds the contract, you have full authorization to review any documents that alter the guest count or trigger our internal safety protocols." She woke up the computer monitor on the desk and turned the screen just enough for the groom to see. "Yesterday," Evelyn explained, "we received an official instruction regarding a potential threat to the event." Daniel stepped closer to the desk and leaned forward. His eyes scanned the black text glowing on the bright screen. I watched the muscles in his neck tighten, pulling taut against the crisp white collar of his shirt. He read the justification box aloud, and his words hung in the chilly air. "History of emotional instability and potential disruption." The groom slowly turned his head to look at the woman sitting in the leather chair. He asked Brittany what exactly those words were based on. He wanted to know what terrible thing I had done to justify a formal documented security warning. Tears welled up instantly in my sister's eyes. spilling over her carefully applied mascara and leaving dark tracks down her pale cheeks. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, falling seamlessly into the role of the terrified victim. "You do not understand," Brittany sobbed, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. "She is always so jealous of me. She always tries to steal the spotlight, and I just wanted to feel safe today. I just wanted one perfect day, without her acting superior." It was a beautiful performance, honed by decades of practice. But tears could not erase digital timestamps, and the venue possessed a flawless memory. Evelyn tapped her keyboard twice, pulling up a completely different internal log. She explained that a severe security concern automatically prompted a review of the master guest portal to check for unauthorized access. The general manager pointed a manicured finger at the version history displayed on the monitor. Daniel stared at the screen. The realization seemed to hit him like a physical blow, causing him to take a small step backward. "I added Vanessa to the portal myself," the groom stated, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I typed her name in 2 weeks ago because I believed your sister belonged at our wedding. And this log says you logged in 3 hours later and deleted her." He looked down at the weeping bride, shaking his head slowly. "You told me she was too bitter about being single to attend," Daniel said, piecing the timeline together out loud. "You looked me right in the eyes and said she was ignoring our invitations. You completely fabricated the entire story." Patricia stepped forward, her silver dress rustling loudly in the tense silence. She moved her body slightly, as if she could physically shield her golden child from the glare of the computer monitor. "Every family has complicated private matters," my mother argued, waving a hand dismissively at the screen. "These are sensitive issues that do not need to be dissected right before a wedding ceremony. Daniel, you are upsetting her. This is supposed to be a celebration." I finally broke my silence, stepping out from the shadows near the window. The cold calmness inside my chest gave my voice absolute clarity. "Private pain became public the moment she called security on me," I said. My mother opened her mouth to argue, but she found nothing to say. The excuse of family privacy had burned to ashes the second my sister pointed her finger in front of 50 wedding guests. Daniel backed further away from the desk, running a hand nervously through his perfectly styled hair. He looked at my sister as if he were seeing a complete stranger hiding inside a white silk dress. The trust that formed the foundation of their relationship was fracturing visibly under the harsh fluorescent lights of the office. "What else?" the groom asked, his tone absolutely chilling. "What else did you tell them about her?" Evelyn looked at the weeping bride, and then she shifted her professional gaze back to the groom. "There is also a discount request," the general manager stated smoothly, her voice betraying absolutely no emotion. "It is tied directly to the exact same security concern." Brittany stopped crying instantly. The sudden stillness in the bride was terrifying. The tears vanished completely, replaced by a rigid, wide-eyed panic. Evelyn clicked the mouse once, and a new window expanded across the computer monitor, illuminating the dark office with its bright white background. The general manager scrolled down to a message sent 2 days ago. Because Daniel shared financial responsibility for the event, Evelyn possessed full clearance to display the billing inquiry. The text sat right there on the screen, clear and undeniable. Brittany had specifically asked management to waive the extra security fees. Her typed justification claimed her sister routinely created scenes when attention shifted away from her, so the venue ought to provide guards as a complimentary courtesy to protect the bridal party. Daniel leaned closer to the monitor. He read the words twice, his breathing growing shallow. "You used your sister to get a discount?" the groom asked, his voice cracking on the final word. "They misunderstood me," Brittany insisted, gripping the armrests of the leather chair. Her knuckles turned stark white. "I was just asking about standard packages." The venue twisted my words. Evelyn did not even look at the bride. The manager addressed Daniel directly, maintaining perfect corporate detachment. She confirmed the discount was not approved, but the email had to be retained in the permanent event file because it directly referenced a physical safety concern. "Claire reported it because she follows protocol," I said quietly from the edge of the room. "A threat to guest safety requires documentation. You just assumed the staff would gossip about family drama, completely unaware that a real business runs on legal liability." My mother could not take it anymore. Patricia stepped in front of the bride, shielding the white lace with her silver gown. Enough, my mother snapped, her tone sharp and desperate. You have humiliated her. Are you happy now, Vanessa? I looked at the woman who had spent 38 years telling me to make myself smaller. The exhaustion sitting in my bones suddenly felt incredibly heavy. Where was that concern, I asked, keeping my voice soft, when she humiliated me out in the foyer. Patricia opened her mouth, ready to deploy another practiced excuse about preserving the peace. Reaching into my clutch, I pulled out my cell phone and unlocked the screen. Holding the device in my palm, I simply read the text message she had sent me earlier that week. Keep her away from the photos, I read aloud. The words fell like stones onto the mahogany desk. This family worked too hard to look respectable. A suffocating silence blanketed the executive office. Patricia froze, her mouth still slightly open. She had no defense. The undeniable truth hovered between us, proving that my exclusion had absolutely nothing to do with safety. They simply found my existence embarrassing. The carefully constructed victim facade shattered completely. Brittany bolted out of the leather chair. Her face flushed a deep, mottled red, and the sweet bridal persona burned away to reveal the vicious entitlement underneath. "Because you are embarrassing!" the bride screamed, her voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "Look at you. You have no husband. You have no children. You just cling to your little job and try to make everyone else as miserable as you are." The insult was completely spontaneous. There was no document to blame, and there was no venue policy to hide behind. Every single person in the private office heard the pure, unfiltered cruelty in her voice. Daniel stared at his fiancée. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking hollowed out and exhausted. Slowly, he reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out a small velvet ring box. The room went completely still. He opened the box and looked down at the simple gold wedding band inside. For a moment, no one breathed. Then he closed the lid with a soft, final click. "Tell me the truth now," Daniel said, his tone entirely drained of warmth. "If one more document speaks before you do, this wedding is over." Daniel waited. The velvet box rested in his open palm, catching the harsh fluorescent light of the executive office. He asked the question again, his voice entirely stripped of all the warmth I remembered from their engagement dinner. My sister stared at the box. The reality of the situation finally seemed to pierce through her panic, and she crumpled back against the dark leather of the chair. Fresh tears spilled over her cheeks, cutting tracks through her heavy makeup, but this time they looked genuine. "Because she makes me feel like nothing," Brittany sobbed, pointing a shaking finger in my direction. "Vanessa always acts so superior. She works all the time, she never asks for help, and everyone always praises how strong she is. I just wanted a space where I was the only one shining. She ruins everything just by being there." I listened to the confession. 38 years of quiet resentment poured out of the bride, echoing off the mahogany walls. "I never stole your spotlight," I told her quietly. "I stayed in the background for 3 decades so you could have it. You were not afraid of me taking your stage. You just could not stand the fact that I finally built one of my own." The bride wiped her face, smearing dark mascara across her cheek. She turned her pleading eyes up to the groom, reaching out a trembling hand toward his tailored jacket. "Daniel, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Are you really choosing her over me?" The man looked down at the woman he loved. He did not yell, and he did not throw the ring box across the room. He simply closed his fingers around it and slipped it back into the inside pocket of his tuxedo. "I am not choosing your sister," Daniel answered. "I am choosing not to marry a liar." Without another word, the groom turned around and walked out the heavy oak door. Without another word, the groom turned around and walked out the heavy oak door. Evelyn Ross immediately stepped forward. The general manager smoothed the lapels of her black suit, maintaining absolute professional detachment. She bypassed the weeping bride entirely and addressed my mother, who remained frozen near the desk. "Because the co-client has officially withdrawn," Evelyn stated, her voice clear and precise, "and due to severe violations of the client conduct clause, Wrenwood Hall is pausing all reception services immediately. The event is effectively terminated." Patricia gasped, pressing a hand to the silver fabric over her chest. "You cannot do this." We have hundreds of guests waiting outside for a ceremony. The contract allows for immediate suspension when ownership staff faces harassment, Evelyn replied smoothly. My team will begin clearing the ballroom. I suggest you collect your personal belongings from the bridal suite. I walked out of the office, following the path Daniel had taken. The foyer had transformed completely. The soft classical music had stopped, replaced by a low, frantic murmur spreading through the crowd of well-dressed guests. Near the coat check, the groom stood with a small group of older people, his parents. Daniel spoke quietly to his mother, shaking his head. He did not wave the security documents around, and he did not expose the discount email to the crowd. The man simply stated that the wedding was off, keeping the darkest details buried in the private office. It was a remarkably graceful exit. I watched him guide his family toward the glass doors, hoping the tension would simply dissipate. Unfortunately, my sister refused to follow his example. The heavy office door banged open behind me. Brittany rushed into the foyer, her white lace dress sweeping violently across the polished marble floor. She ignored the confused stares of her own guests and marched directly toward the floral archway where I stood. "You ruined it!" she screamed, her voice bouncing sharply off the glass dome above us. "This was supposed to be the best day of my life, and you destroyed it." The remaining polite whispers died instantly. Every single person in the room turned to watch the bride completely unravel. This was no longer a private matter hidden in a secure file. Brittany was broadcasting her breakdown to the entire room, entirely by her own choice. I stood my ground near the white lilies. I did not raise my voice to match hers, and I did not step back. "You wanted me removed from your wedding," I said, letting the words carry clearly across the silent stone floor. "Congratulations, Brittany. You removed yourself." My mother rushed forward from the corridor, her silver dress catching the overhead light. Patricia grabbed my arm, her cold fingers digging painfully into my skin. "Vanessa, do something," the older woman pleaded, looking frantically around at the horrified faces of our extended family. "Fix this right now. Tell them it was just a misunderstanding. Please, save our dignity." I looked down at the hand gripping my arm, and then I looked right into my mother's eyes. "You stood beside her when she called security on me," I reminded her, firmly pulling my arm free. "You watched her lie, and you chose to protect the perfect image over the truth. From today on, you do not walk into any building I own, unless I invite you." Patricia stepped back, her mouth falling open. The realization finally settled over her features. She had sacrificed her oldest daughter to maintain a flawless illusion, and now she possessed neither. The crowd slowly began to disperse. Guests pulled their coats from the racks, avoiding eye contact with the weeping bride standing in the center of the ruined foyer. The grand autumn celebration had collapsed in under 30 minutes. Brittany watched Daniel walk out the front doors, disappearing into the chilly Connecticut afternoon. She turned back to me, her chest heaving, the smeared makeup making her look like a terrifying broken doll. "You think this is over?" she whispered, her tone dropping into a harsh hiss. "I will tell everyone what you did today. I will tell the whole world that you sabotaged my wedding." I glanced up at the small red light blinking on the security camera mounted above the check-in desk. Then, I looked over at the cream-colored incident folder resting safely in Evelyn's hands. "Then tell them," I answered, turning my back on her to walk toward the executive corridor. This time, I have the receipts. 1 week passed before the dust finally settled over Fairfield County. The morning sunlight poured through the large windows of my executive office, warming the polished mahogany desk. I sat back in my leather chair and took a slow sip of hot coffee, enjoying the absolute quiet. A notification illuminated my phone screen. My sister had finally broken her digital silence. Brittany posted a single, vague sentence on her social media feed, claiming that some people simply could not stand seeing others happy. She attached a black and white photo of her veil, trying to spin a tragedy for her followers. The strategy failed miserably. Within 10 minutes, the comment section filled with questions from actual wedding guests. People demanded to know why she had filed a false security report, and several aunts asked directly about the venue owner. Wrenwood Hall did not participate in the online drama. Evelyn Ross released a brief, dry statement from our corporate account. The general manager confirmed the event was paused due to client conduct concerns and a co-client withdrawal. We released absolutely no private records, letting the deafening silence speak entirely for itself. My laptop chimed with an incoming email. The sender name read Daniel Reed. I opened the message and scanned the brief paragraphs. The former groom apologized for failing to see the truth earlier, admitting he should have asked more questions when my name mysteriously disappeared from the guest list. He confirmed the engagement was officially broken. His final request asked for the return of his family gifts and the base deposit he had personally transferred. I forwarded the email to accounting with a note to process his refund immediately. Daniel did not deserve to pay for a disaster he did not create. The bride and her mother, however, faced a very different financial reality. Evelyn walked into my office an hour later, placing a freshly printed invoice on my desk. The itemized bill detailed the non-refundable bridal upgrades, the security overtime, and the staff disruption fees. My sister had also thrown her heavy bouquet into the grand floral arch on her way out, snapping several expensive wooden supports. We added a property damage charge, along with the legal review fee explicitly outlined in the contract. They received the final bill this morning, Evelyn noted, adjusting her dark blazer. And we just had an interesting visitor at the front check-in. My mother had arrived at the estate unannounced, expecting to bypass the rules just as she had done my entire life. Claire greeted her at the front desk with perfect professional courtesy, asking for an appointment. When Patricia demanded to see her daughter, the coordinator politely explained that management did not take unscheduled walk-ins. The woman who had spent decades crossing my boundaries was finally stopped by a set of glass doors she did not own. I agreed to meet her later that afternoon, choosing a busy coffee shop downtown to keep the conversation brief and public. Patricia sat at a small corner table, her hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup. She looked exhausted, completely lacking the polished country club armor she usually wore so well. When I sat down across from her, she did not offer a hug or a smile. "I did not know," my mother whispered, staring down at her black coffee. "Vanessa, I had no idea you owned that place. If you had just told us the truth about your career, none of this would have happened." A bitter laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. I looked at the older woman, studying the tired lines around her eyes, and realized she still wanted to blame me for my own public humiliation. "You did not need to know I owned the building," I answered, keeping my voice steady and low. "You did not need to know my net worth to understand that I did not deserve to be thrown out like trash. You stood there and watched my sister lie, and you told me to accept it. Ownership has nothing to do with basic dignity." Patricia opened her mouth, but the excuse died on her tongue. Her eyes filled with tears, finally realizing that no amount of guilt or manipulation could fix what she had permanently broken. I stood up from the table, leaving my coffee untouched. I did not wish her ill, but I was completely done carrying her emotional baggage. Later that evening, I walked through the empty main ballroom of Wrenwood Hall. The catering staff had completely cleared away the white lilies, the rented chairs, and the shattered illusions of the previous weekend. The massive space smelled like lemon polish and clean air. My heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor. I looked up at the crystal chandeliers, tracing the grand architecture of the estate I had purchased with my own hard work. The room did not feel like a battlefield anymore. It simply felt like a place I had built. My sister wanted me removed from her wedding. In the end, she removed herself from my life. And for the first time, the silence she left behind felt like peace. Sometimes, the hardest lesson you will ever have to learn is that the people who share your blood are not always the people who have your back. You can spend decades making yourself smaller, biting your tongue, and standing quietly in the shadows just to keep the fragile peace in your family. You convince yourself that if you just give a little more, or ask for a little less, they will finally recognize your value and treat you with the dignity you deserve. But the undeniable truth is that you do not need anyone else to validate your worth, and you certainly do not need a grand title. The most powerful thing you can do when faced with people who only want to use your pain to make themselves look better is to simply step aside and let their own choices catch up with them. You do not have to fight, you do not have to scream, and you do not have to build an elaborate trap to prove you are right. When you build your own life on a foundation of quiet strength and honesty, the truth will always reveal itself in the end. Walking away from the people who are supposed to love you is never easy. But your peace of mind is worth far more than a seat at a table where your presence is barely tolerated. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member to protect your own peace? And how did you find the courage to finally draw that hard boundary? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might be exactly the inspiration someone else needs to hear today.